Although we've already recited a Surah Fatiha, a lot of times we don't remember that the road that took us here and brought us to where we are right now was paved by a lot of people that we don't know. That we don't even know that the role that they played in us coming to the place we are right now. Perhaps there's people that built the center, perhaps people who had some sort of effect on our forefathers that brought us to the place and situation we are now. And for that sake, maybe we can just have a general thinking and thought that anyone and all that has a right upon us, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala looks at them and sees that they played a role in us coming to our place as it is now. Inshallah, let's recite another Surah Fatiha for them and all of their marhumin. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد آل محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين لا سيما بقية الله في الأراضين روحي وأرواحنا نترى بمقدمه الفداء فقد قال الله في كتابه المجيد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم من ذا الذي يقرض الله قرضا حسنا فيضاعفه له أضعافا كثيرا والله يقبض ويبسط وإليه ترجعون صدق الله العلي العظيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. For the hastening of the reappearance of our Imam, please recite a louder salawat. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. And so we can be among the closest companions of the Imam, the ones who respond to his call without needing to hear his call. Please recite the loudest of salawat. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرج. Again, dear brothers and sisters, it's a great honor for myself to be in front of you. Inshallah, my earnest hope and desire is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts this as something that's beneficial, at the very least for myself and inshallah for you as well. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that if anything was said, either yesterday, last night, and in the coming nights tonight, that was against His wisdom and against what is true, then He removes it from our hearts and minds and replaces that with what is truly beneficial and takes us closer to our ultimate purpose. That being said, I want to give a brief recap of what we talked about yesterday and then inshallah move on from there. We had talked about how as we come here for displaying and showing and condoling each other and the Imam of our time regarding the musibah and masaib of Karbala and what happened to Imam Hussein alayhi salam, that this display of love and emotion that we have is only real if it brings about change within ourselves. The love of Imam Hussein alayhi salam is only truly the love of Imam Hussein if we start to become more and more Husseini. If we see that that's not happening, that our actions are becoming less and less like our Imam, then we have to question ourselves if we actually even have any love for that Imam. The first step to having love for anything is to have some level of awareness of that person, that thing. If you don't know it, if you don't know a person, if you don't know anything about them, then you can't really love them. You can't have any real attachment to them. It's not possible. What you in fact have, if you have some sort of love or infatuation, it's with a mental construct. It's a false image of that person. It's not the real person that's there. And so we need to know our Imams. We need to know what they stood for. We need to know what Imam Hussein strove for, what his life and what his death was done in service of, if we want to have love for him. And then once we have that love brings us along. It pulls us towards Him. It inculcates within ourselves the attributes and characteristics of that Imam. We see very clearly, right? We have plenty of hadith, right? Plenty of hadith that talk about the fadila of and the greatness of the majalis that have the dhikr and remembrance of the Ahlul Bayt. There's no doubt about it. There's no doubt that the greatness and the fadila of the Ahlul Bayt is something beneficial and should be mentioned time and time again. And that love that we develop and that amazement that we have for these great personalities is something that's crucial. There's no doubt about it. But it's not sufficient. It needs to be paired with movement towards what these Imams stand for and stood for. That was the first point that we made. Now this progress and change that we want to make happen within ourselves is very, very much benefited by having these majalis. Because it's a natural time, a natural point within our calendar year where we can look back into our previous year and see where we were. And have a checkpoint that, okay, now that a year has passed, I can go again and see, have I progressed, have I not? Am I the same person, am I someone different? It's a natural thing. Not only that, by fact of what this majalis are for, that they're heart-rendering, it's saddening, we cry, it softens our hearts and allows us to create change more readily. It's something that takes us away from our daily busy schedules, the entrapments of this world, and we are here mourning and remembering something so far off that it removes us from those distractions, or it's very easy for that to happen. It's just something we should lean into and use wisely, this opportunity that's been afforded to us. Now, what holds us back? What stops us from making this movement forward? What stops us from actually using these majalis, using this natural time that's right in front of us? It's the attention that we have to this world. The love that we have for this world. And to an extent, it's understandable. Right? We have a physical aspect to our being. It's undeniable. Right? We're not trying to deny that we have material desires. That's something that's there. It's for sure there. And it's not something that we can ignore. It's something that needs to be paid attention to. Nobody's denying that at all. But everything has to be in balance. Everything has a purpose. And we accept this naturally. If you take out religion from the picture for a moment, naturally almost everyone around the world will accept this to one degree or another. That the material things that you have in this world are not enough on their own. It has to serve some sort of purpose, some goal. If there's no goal that you have, then in and of itself, it doesn't fill you, it doesn't satisfy you. It's when it's attached to something, done for a purpose, that it gives some level of satisfaction. But riches for the sake of riches, it doesn't give you anything. Which is why you see plenty of people who are very wealthy and well off and seemingly have a very good life. Right? You should put that in quotation marks. They're depressed. They don't live very happy lives, so to speak. And as, stereotypical and well used the phrase might be, but money doesn't buy happiness. And it's true. I'm not saying it's irrelevant, but it on its own is not enough. Even if you're not even thinking about religion. Think about it from this perspective. If I were to tell you that you can get an amazing job, with amazing pay, all of the sort of benefits that you could imagine, and you don't have to go to university. And if you go to university, it's not going to advantage you in any particular way. Right? Sure, you'll get a degree. You'll have a piece of paper that said you graduated. But in terms of your progress in life, in terms of the status that you have in front of people, in terms of monetary gain, it gives you nothing. Again, I'm not actually saying that. I'm saying assume that. Who would go and get a degree? who would spend money and effort and years after years of studying and all of that difficulty to get a degree? Right? If you want to know things, you can learn things without the degree, right? You don't have to get a piece of paper that says it, right? And if you wanted the job, then you could get the job without it. If you wanted the status, according to this scenario, you'd have the status without it. The degree mattered because of what it afforded you, what it opened up in terms of opportunities for you going forward. But if it was without any purpose, inherently, it didn't give anything. Our whole lives in some way are like that. Every single moment of our life is like that. There should be a purpose. And if we're not paying attention to that purpose, right, then we'll see that our lives start to compartmentalize. We have an aspect of our life that's in the center. Right? An aspect of our life that's, when we're with our parents or with other elders of our family. An aspect of our life when we're not with them, when we're with our friends. Right? And if you look at the person, it's comprised with all of these different things, and it doesn't look like it's one person. Right? It looks like it's 3 different people, 4 different people, all crammed into one. And sooner or later, one of those things will overwhelm the others. And this is the reality, right? The reality, of people who have grown up in the West, raised in the West. Myself, I grew up, raised in the West. I went to public school. Right? The vast majority of your day, right? Vast majority of your day is surrounded by influences and things that are not Islamic. And who you are in a great way is fashioned by those influences. It's difficult to swim against that tide. It's difficult, extremely difficult. To the parents, I'll say this. Right? Don't expect a child that's put into a public school system and surrounded by these influences and having no safety net to be able to survive that and then magically become a good Muslim out of it. Just because they came to the center. That's not a reasonable expectation. Something has to be done. Something extra. Something more. In any case, that wasn't a major point, or the point I wanted to go on, but it was something I felt necessary to say. Now, if we look at this idea that what holds us back is this attraction to this world and our enchantment with it, there's a very interesting verse of the Quran which describes the role and the mission of the Prophet. Within it, it mentions this line. It says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. It says, وَيَضَعُ عَنْهُمْ إِسْرَهُمْ وَالْأَغْلَالِ الَّتِي كَانَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ. That the Prophet came to release them from the binds and shackles that are on them, right? On the people. Comes to free the people. The first thing is that this sounds really nice. Who doesn't want to be free? Right? Everyone wants to be free. Nobody wants to be shackled. But free for what? Free to what? Does that mean that the Prophet came to say that you can do whatever you want to do? Blank check. You're good to go? No. Right before that, in the same ayah, it says that that the Prophet came to make halal the things that are tayyib, the things that are good, and make haram the things that are khaba'ith, the things that are disgusting and ugly. So he's already making restrictions. There's restrictions right before that. And then it says it comes to free them. How does that work together? How is there a freedom and restriction that is happening in one place? And this is where, again, we think of freedom in the wrong way. Because of what we're surrounded with in the sort of normal parlance of using the word freedom, the way that it's associated with, we always think of freedom to do things. I'm free to do this, to do that. Or I'm restricted in the sense that I have to do this or can't do that. We think always in freedom in this sense. But there's another way of looking at freedom, and that's freedom from. You can be freed from something. That something could be binding you, and you could be released from that. What is it that the Prophet came to release us from? It's from the idea and the delusion that this world is what's important. That what we gain in this world, as we're here in this material world, is what it's all about. That the riches that we gain, even in some ways the children that we have, the family relations that we have, that it's inherently important here. No. He's freeing us from that delusion. Inshallah, we'll talk about this and the ramifications of this freedom, inshallah, throughout the nights. It's not my main topic, but inshallah, we'll expand on that more throughout other aspects that we're going to be talking about. Now, when we realize and have, inshallah, this realization that this world is not all that there is, let me take another small divergence here. This realization of having and accepting beliefs in our religion is not something that can be taught. Right? To a certain level, yes, teaching is required. Right? You have to learn about religion. It makes sense. Someone has to tell you about the tenets of religion, prove things to you. All those things are there. But if I don't make the effort of thinking about it, pondering about it, spending my quiet time asking myself difficult, hard questions about what I truly believe in and how I truly see the world, then you'll see that that belief system evaporates at the soonest and quickest sign of difficulty. It crumbles because it's not really real to me. If I want to actually claim to be a Muslim, I have to spend time and effort in developing that belief. Belief is not a thing of blind faith. Iman that we have has nothing to do with accepting the word of someone else. No. Iman has to do with understanding and seeing and viewing that reality ourselves. Seeing it to be real. So I have to make the effort to be able to do that. I can't imagine and expect it all to just come magically to me. I have to do the effort in thinking about things, pondering about it. And that's difficult. If you test it yourselves, you'll see this, right? If you take the time, right? Maybe even try tonight, right? Take the time tonight, before sleeping, something like that. 5 minutes, that's it. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, something small. Ask yourself a deep, difficult question about yourself. Ask yourself, am I a Muslim? Right? Not by name, not by birth, not by this thing, that thing, no. Do I truly and really believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And that I was created by Him? And that there is a day of judgment and a hereafter, and my actions in this world will lead to my everlasting life in the next? Don't have to write it down, don't have to admit it in front of anyone, but stop and think about it. I promise you, most of us will not last more than 2 minutes thinking about it. Because we're afraid. We're afraid of the answers. Right? Because on one side, right, we might say that we don't want to believe in it because it brings up all of these obligations. But on the other side, right, almost instinctively we know it to be the truth. But if we accept it to be the truth consciously in front of us, then it brings out its own obligations. For example, if I know that under this bush that's right in front of me, right, there's a poisonous snake, venomous snake that's going to bite me, if I take one step right there, if I know that, then I'm not going to take that step. Right? It's very clear. No matter what benefit I might gain, right? That's 3 steps in front or 4 steps, I won't do it because I won't last. I won't make it there. Right? The danger is too much. If hellfire in the next world is real to us, then no matter what benefits we might gain by going against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's laws, no matter what sort of pleasures and things of this world might be there, it's not worth it. And we're afraid of that realization. And so we'll try to hide. But we need to push ourselves. Right? It's not something that can be gained by someone else throwing it into our minds. No speech, no class, nothing will do that for us. They help. Of course they help. But we have to take the time to think and ponder ourselves. Please just say salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Now there's another series of verses. I apologize in advance, but it's not a real apology because I'm not actually sorry, but it sounds nice to say it. But I'm going to quote a lot of verses throughout the next 10 nights. It's something that I think is many times missing from our majalis and sittings together, is that, well, this is a book of guidance. If it's a book of guidance, then we should be using this to guide ourselves, right? And as much as possible, we should be having it around us. We should be opening it, reading it, reflecting it. Right? And I heavily encourage, if it's possible for you, have it on your phone, follow along on the verses that I quote. If it helps, I'll quote the page number or anything like that. Inshallah, it's something beneficial. At least have the tawfiq, if nothing else within this majalis, to look at and view these few verses of the Quran to help us, inshallah. There's a few verses of the Quran in Surah An'am, the 6th Surah, verse number 112 and onwards. I won't go too far, maybe I'll just read 2 verses, inshallah. It says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وكذلك جعلنا لكل نبي عدوا شياطين الإنس والجن يوحي بعضهم إلى بعض زخرف القول غرورا. It says, and similarly, and don't want to explain too much about what the similar thing is, it'll take too long and distract from the main point. It says that we have made for every prophet enemies that are the shayateen, right? It's in plural, the shaitans with an S at the end, from among the humans and the jinn. And these humans and jinn that are these enemies, says, يُوحِي بَعْضُهُمْ إِلَى بَعْضٍ زُخْرُفَ الْقَوْلِ, says that they whisper to each other, زُخْرُفَ الْقَوْلِ, these deceptive, charming words. Let's skip to the next verse. It says, وَلِتَصْغَى إِلَيْهِ أَفْئِدَةُ الَّذِينَ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْآخِرَةِ وَلِيَرْضَوْهُ وَلِيَقْتَرِفُوا مَا هُمْ مُقْتَرِفُونَ. It says that when you let this speech go, in the part that I skipped and I didn't read, when you let this speech and these things happen, what happens is that these people, their hearts will incline towards them. Whose hearts? The hearts of those who do not believe in the next world. The enemies of the Prophet, right? There's 2 ayahs, if we combine them and understand what they're saying, at least in one aspect. Being said that they're whispering these words to each other, and these words have an immediate impact in charming the hearts of the people who do not believe in the next world. And so they become the enemies of the Prophet. It's not an easy thing to say that I'm not an enemy of the Prophet. Because that's something that's not a matter of the tongue, not even a matter of the heart only. It has to be demonstrated through our actions. If the Prophet came to tell me and say that these are the laws, pray, wear hijab, do sawm, do amr bil ma'roof and nahy al munkar. Right? The most important wajib that we have is amr bil ma'roof and nahy al munkar. If we're not doing that, then how can I say that I'm a lover of the Prophet? I'm following the Prophet. Following the Prophet meaning what? We say it in our name, we say I'm a Shia, right? That means I'm a follower. Right? Who am I following? if I'm not actually following what the Imams and the Prophet are telling me to do, then how am I a Shia? Right? It doesn't make sense. It's easy for me to say and call myself a Shia, but it's not worth anything. Right? What's worth something is if the Imam recognized me as his follower. Right? That's something that's worth something. That's something that's real. So I want to gain that. That's what I want to gain. Again, it doesn't happen easily. It has to be worked for. Now, if we look at what happens when we don't have the right worldview, when we look at, for example, this world is all that there is. Right? And for most of us, alhamdulillah, that doesn't happen very overtly. But it does happen a lot of times more subtly throughout our lives, other in various aspects of our lives. What happens? Obviously, you organize your life according to what you know to be real. If you don't actually believe in something to be real, then it's not going to have much bearing on your decisions. If you read Harry Potter and you know that it's a fiction, or watch the movie and you know that it's a fiction thing, no matter how many spells you learn, it's not going to really have any impact on your decisions. Hopefully it doesn't. Hopefully it doesn't. It's when something is real that it makes an impact. So this is a way to test our beliefs. Right? And again, this is something that we become afraid of. But it's a realization that's important. Our actions are a way to test our beliefs. I want to see, am I actually someone who believes in the religion that I claim to believe in? Look at my actions. Am I following what that religion is telling me to do? If I'm not, then I know that there's a weakness somewhere in my belief system. Now, I don't say this as something that should, push people into, being depressed about themselves or becoming, critiquing themselves so much so that they, feel like there's no point in anything, and that we have our weakness. Concentrate on that so that we can shore it up. If I see within myself that I don't have, I don't need to do this, my heart being good and I can be a good person and God will be, we're not trying to have some sort of have that intellectual bent that want to sort of have the proofs. It's there. It's not even something recent, right, that these things have been developed and talked about. They've been there. They're available. Yes, it might require a level of effort to go and find a class, find a teacher and all those things. That's there. But it's available. The path forward is there. If we don't want that, don't need an intellectual proof, and many people don't. The signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are here, innumerable. Just look around us. Look at ourselves, the lives that we have, our bodies, the world around us, the stars, everything. Everything that you think about. Some people say that, it was so easy for the people at the time of the Prophet. They saw the miracles and then, obviously they'd believe. Obviously they believe. If you want to look at the miracles, it's all around us. We are the miracle of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Could you imagine someone, anything, creating anything from nothing? Without having any previous substance, energy, anything before that? It's not something that we can make sense of. The very fact of our existence, the very fact of the existence of the universe is in itself a miracle. Something that cannot be repeated, cannot be done other than by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we think about it, the signs are clear. Now, if we want to go forward on this, we see that people who didn't have this worldview, right, and accept that there's a next world, or didn't have it real enough to them, there's a dramatic impact on their decision making. Right? And it's not, as we said, it's not black and white. It's not either like I'm Muslim 100% or disbelieve in Islam 100%. No, there's a gradient. We see that within the event of Karbala and Ashura itself. Right? Look at Umar ibn Sa'd. He says himself, what is narrated from him, that on one side I see heaven, on the other side I see hell. But what can I do? I want the governance of right. He says it, he realizes it. It's not like it's something hidden. He realizes it. But that desire for that thing in this world is so much, it overwhelms anything, any understanding of that reality. And we can think to ourselves, we see that in our own lives. Any time that I commit a sin, the same thing is happening. When I commit that sin, what I'm saying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in reality is that my desire and the pleasure I get from that is more real to me than any potential reward or punishment that I can imagine that's going to be in the hereafter. That's basically what I'm saying. It's an immediate impact on our actions. They're not two separate things. Now, please recite Salat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Muhammad wa ala. There's other examples that we can give too. One of the examples that might be more striking for ourselves, in the sense that unfortunately we might identify with this person more. Umar ibn Sa'd, inshallah, we don't identify with. Inshallah, we see that decision at the very least we wouldn't make. But this person, perhaps we would make a decision like him. There's another person in this event of Karbala by the name of Ubaydullah ibn Hur al-Ju'fi. Very famous story. Right? In case anyone hasn't, I'll very briefly say the story. He's someone who is, seen when Hur was taking Imam Hussein and pushing them towards Karbala. They came across this person, Ubaydullah ibn Hur al-Ju'fi, who had escaped from Kufa. And Imam Hussein calls him. Right? He sees him and he calls him. So the invitation is from Imam Hussein himself. It's narrated, he calls him and then he says that, look, this Ubaydullah ibn Hur al-Ju'fi is saying that, look, I know that you're on the truth. I know whatever you're doing, the truth is with you. But I'm looking at things and me being there or not being there is not really going to change anything. Right? The numbers are against you. Right? Me as one person, I can't do anything. But what I do have is a horse. And this horse has never lost in any race. Right? It's a horse that's never lost. So if you need to escape or run away, you can take my horse. Right? Imam says, or is reported to say that, look, I'm not inviting you for me. I'm inviting you for you. It's for your sake. But this is the idea. Right? The idea was that this world, the benefit, he wasn't ready to let go of this world. As much as we constantly keep on saying and praying for the return of our own Imam, again and again, how many of us are actually willing to sacrifice everything that we have for that Imam? This isn't a matter of slogans and saying things and chanting things to each other. No. We're talking real. Let's be honest with each other, with ourselves. If the Imam was here right now and demanded for me to go, leave this instant, no time for preparation, no hesitancy, right now, would we be ready? Would our families be able to handle it? Would they be willing to accept it? Leaving them, having that sacrifice. It's difficult. It's really difficult. But that's the reality. That's the real thing. The verse in the Quran that I quoted in the very beginning, and I quoted it last night as well, but I was unable to reach the point of talking about it. In fact, I'm about to run out of time and not manage to talk about it today either. But very briefly, it says, مَنْ ذَا الَّذِي يُقْرِضُ اللَّهَ قَرْضًا حَسَنًا. Who is the one who is ready to give Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala a good loan? And in response, فَيُضَاعِفَهُ لَهُ أَضْعَافًا كَثِيرًا. In response, it'll multiply many times. What is a loan? When you give a loan to someone, the original amount that you give is kept safe. It's not buying. Buying, you lose what you have and you gain something else. A loan, you don't even lose that first part. You're just giving it temporarily, but you get that back. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, you don't not only just get the original back, it's going to be multiplied more and more and more. That's the trade that we can accomplish in this world, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is offering to us. Abide by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and what He asks of us. And it's in our own self-interest. None of the benefit returns to Allah. It's not for Him, it's for us. He's absolute. Our prayers don't help Him, our sins don't harm Him. Nothing affects Him. He's beyond us. Everything that He asks for is for us. So it's a loan. We get back all of our efforts. Everything that we've expended, it's not a loss, it's all gain. There's no more beneficial trade or transaction that we can make than that. But that talk, it's easy to do. What's difficult is to actually practically arrange our lives like that. Just make one last point, inshallah. I had a lot more to say, but I think we'll go too far. Sometimes the effect of looking at the world differently, as I mentioned, is a lot more subtle than we think it is. For example, look at the various different sort of occupations or things that we might study. Right? In the humanities, right, we can see a very stark difference between something that's based on Islam and an Islamic understanding of reality and something that's not. The starkest example of that is probably in psychology. Where in psychology you're looking at the psyche of the person and you're trying to find a way in the various different definitions of the field and how to get them back to balance or how to solve various issues or whatnot. That might be the definition. But obviously that's based on an understanding of what a human is. A secular understanding of a human will be divorced from any understanding of the soul. It'll be looking at the human as a material being. Perhaps looking at all of the imbalances as reflections of various brain chemistry and things like that. Which again, I'm not denying that it's there. But it's not looking at the soul. And so there's a very stark difference that we can see this. I'm not saying that everything that you would learn in that is not beneficial. I'm not saying that at all. I'm not trying to make any judgment about the field at all. I'm just trying to demonstrate that it's something that obviously would make a difference if you were to base it on an Islamic understanding of reality versus not. What about other things? Look at the field of finance. Right? Things that are in finance, right? You might say that, okay, well, money is money. I mean, it's a tool. Nobody is, the tool doesn't define your beliefs. And that's true to an extent. But what about the ethos of the field? The atmosphere that it's surrounded with. Right? That everything is about gain, profit and loss. And profit and loss defined by the material, by this world. It's so much pressure that eventually you tend to look at your whole life in those terms of profit and loss. And that becomes the most important thing. Inescapable to go out of it. I'll stop here. I'll mention one small story and then I'll mention a few words of musibah. There's more to say about these fields of study. Inshallah, we'll continue tomorrow, inshallah, if Allah gives us the tawfiq. But just stop here for a moment. Last time when I was entering the United States from Iran, not this past time that I came, but I came for tabligh in the month of Ramadan. Alhamdulillah, we have the tawfiq of having conversations with the people at the border a lot. They keep us in rooms for several hours and talk to us. So this time, the first gentleman that stopped me, it was before I even got to the room in the back. It was in that, the first person that you talk to when you're entering the US, someone scans your passport and then tells you to go into the room in the back. He asked me, what do I do in Iran? And I told him that, I study. He asked me how long I've been studying. I said I've been studying for about 11 years now. And then he said, what's your plan after that? And I said, I honestly don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do after. I don't have some precise plan or anything. And then he told me that, you're going to have to do something. And I responded, I was like, do I? Right? Is it the case that learning, the purpose of learning, of becoming aware of reality, is to then use that to gain something from it? To then gain material from it? Is the utility of knowledge and awareness of reality purely material gain? Money? If that's what it is, then we're basically become slaves of this world. Our minds have become slaves of this world. Because the limit of what we can understand is going to be in profit and loss. Reality is much more than that. Our purpose is to understand reality, not because it's something that will lead to some other gain. No. In some ways, real understanding of reality is the goal itself. We have an account of history where Imam Hussein goes out to his companions and he says, Ya ayyuhan nas, ma khalaqa Allah al-ibad illa liya'rafuh. That Allah SWT did not create His servants except to become aware of Him. فَإِذَا عَرَفُوا عَبَدُوا. Once they become aware of Him, they'll worship Him. فَإِذَا عَبَدُوا اسْتَغْنَى بِعِبَادَتِي عَنْ عِبَادَةِ مَا سَوَاهُ. If they worship Him, they'll become needless of worshipping anything else through that worship. What does that mean? If you look at it from the opposite, it means that if I'm not worshipping Allah, then I am worshipping something else. I've chained myself to something else, whether I'm cognizant of it or not. Inshallah, we can spend a few moments reminding ourselves and commemorating the musibah of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah wa ala al-arwah allati hallat bifanaik. Alayka minni salamullah أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. Dear brothers and sisters, the beginning of Imam Hussein's journey and caravan to Karbala started in Medina. We all know the story of how Yazid the Mal'un called upon his governor in Medina to gain the bay'ah and allegiance of Imam Hussein al-Islam. And in response, how Imam Hussein al-Islam was forced to flee from the city of the Prophet. But have we ever stopped to think about what that really meant for Imam Hussein al-Islam? The memories that he must have had within that city. The city itself is called Madinatun Nabi, the city of the Prophet, and is the city that the grandson of the Prophet is being driven out from. This is the city where the Prophet recited the verse where he says, لا أسألكم عليه أجرا إلا المودة في القربة. I don't ask of you any reward except for having love for my close relatives. And how does the people of the Prophet respond? How do they respond? Where is the grave of Hazrat Fatima Zahra? Where is the grave of the daughter of the Prophet? Where is Imam Ali alayhi salam? At that time, remember that the grave of Imam Ali is also not known. The people don't even know where his grave is. The body of Imam Hassan al-Islam, arrows are thrown at it to prevent him being buried next to the Prophet. Is this muwadda? Is this the love? On the night before the departure of Imam Hussein and his family from Medina, it's narrated that Imam Hussein went to the grave of his grandfather, the Prophet, peace be upon him. We don't know exactly what happened in that conversation. Perhaps he complained about these people and their enmity towards him. Whatever happened, what is narrated is that Imam Hussein fell to sleep or became unconscious and had a dream in which he saw the Prophet. And in one account, the Prophet says to him, Ya bunayya, O my son, I see you murammalun bid-dama, I see you covered in blood. O my son, your father, your mother, your brother are calling for you, waiting for you. But shahadat is a necessary condition for you to come. In the farewells of Imam Hussein from his, we do not know where Hazrat Fatima Zahra is buried. But surely Imam Hussein does know. We don't know what he would have said to his mother, bidding farewell to her. On the journey to Karbala, there are many difficulties and misfortunes that befell this caravan. There are many things that happen of companions joining and leaving. At one time, Imam Hussein on the night of Ashura is saying a line of poetry in his tent where he decries the time. This is the time has been such an unfaithful friend to him. It's narrated that Hazrat Zainab was hearing this. She heard this line of poetry. And she rushes to her brother and says, Oh my brother, what you've said has put a level of doubt within my heart about your companions. We know what happened to our father Imam Ali and his companions. We know how our brother Hassan was betrayed by his companions. Have you tested your companions? Are you sure about them? We don't know who passed by and heard. Perhaps it was Zuhair, perhaps it was Habib who was passing by and heard the words of Hazrat Zainab. But hearing those words, they come to all the companions and tell them, look, Zainab is doubting us. Zainab has doubt about our devotion. Let's go and show that we will not allow a single drop of the blood of Bani Hashim to be shed as long as we live. But what can be done? A time comes on the day of Ashura when that dream of the Prophet comes true. When Hazrat Zainab is on Tilla Zainabiyya and she's looking down and she says, Salla alayka Malik as-sama, Hada al-Husayn. This is Hussein. laying bare on the sands, مُرَمَّمًا بِالدَّمَاء مُقَطِّعُ الْعَذَابِ, covered in blood, and his limbs cut. على لعنة الله على قوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. مات الحسين.